Hi, and welcome to another episode of UMO.Design, a design dialogue series. I am Shama Sundar Duriseti, co-founder UMO.Design and co-chair Content UX India Conference. For this episode, it's my pleasure to introduce Vanitha Shankar, our speaker at the upcoming International Conference on Design, UXIndia 2021. Hi, Vanitha. It's my pleasure to have you on UMO.Design's a design dialogue series. UMO Design community is delighted to learn more from you in the lead up to UXIndia 2021. So let's start this session with our theme and topic, the big shift. In the last 18 months, the world has seen accelerated transformation in all aspects of our lives. So can you please share your thoughts on the big shift and the role of design to start with?
Thanks, Shama. Like I said, thank you all for putting together this conference for all of us. So to answer your question straight, I think the way we can look at it is that we are living in a liminal space and we are kind of entering into an unfamiliar future, which is very different from what we've seen in the past and in the present, right? And we are seeing a lot of changes happening all around us. And we are also seeing the future emerging in the fringes of the present. And we can see it in the form of digital disruption, economic shifts, environmental changes, geopolitical dynamics, and many more. And I think in this context, it's very important for us to kind of speculate how different scenarios would play out based on what we know and these changes that are happening. How will these changes interweave, and how would they play out into the future? I think is one way of looking at how the future could actually play out. And it's very important for us to do this because only when we see, how the future will play out, we can actually come back to the present and be intentional about how we want to design the future. Because today we are just, going ahead with our present. Of course, we are noticing all this. We are reading all of this in the news, but somewhere we get caught in our daily activities, right? But it's very important for us to speculate different scenarios of the future to be able to intentionally create preferred futures. And so I think speculative design has a very important role to play in the context of how futures are emerging. And I also see the role of design in the present context, right? It's about gaining deeper understanding of what is happening all around us, understanding it in the context of people, in the context of changes. And there are like organizational transformations happening everywhere. So what kind of transformations, how purposeful are we, or how intentional are we about the transformations? Innovation is big now. And so, instead of innovating for the sake of innovating, just thinking through how will this play out in the future in the context. I think these are all very, very important. And this is where I see, that design has a very critical role to play, especially, in the current context. And design also, I think, provides the right set of, it's more of a philosophy, right? I mean, it gives us the right philosophy, ethics, tools, processes, everything that we need. And I think that if we use it wisely, I think design has the power to create, desirable futures. And what I wish and how I see design evolving is also integrating into systems, processes, and just becoming a way of life. So
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Great. So you kind of touched upon what you're currently doing in your role, right? So as an independent design strategist, you've been helping organizations see the transformation, see through them with problem identification, realize their goals through purpose-driven design approach, right? So in your practice on these lines, have you seen any shift in the approach that you take? How are you riding this wave, basically? So what are some of the challenges you're facing and opportunities as well?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question you're asking. So today I'm a design strategist for organization transformation and a problem-based research. But I started off 20 years back when design was very new in software companies and product development companies, right? And I started as a navigation specialist and an information architect. And then I moved on to process designing, and then I moved on to community designing during my sabbatical. And then, putting together panels and programs, a think tank kind of approach. And now I am actually looking at, organization transformation. So if I were to sum up my career, I've designed in teams, in communities, and in communities. I mean, that's broadly how I would put the entire journey. And what I've learned in this journey is design is transformative. It is very new. It is like changing, and people naturally have a tendency to resist change. So, as designers, we are always, kind of trying to push through some change, which is quite challenging, right? And so, if I were to look back 20 years ago, I had to, evangelize design and integrate it in the development process, right? And then later I had to talk about how important design is for processes. And then today I'm seeing myself talking to stakeholders about the importance of problem-based research and, a purpose-driven approach to design. So at each stage, it is about, driving these changes, talking to people. So at each stage, the design problem actually changes, the medium changes, but people, working with people remains constant. But I think, over the years, your work also starts to speak for itself. And then you also find advocates who will kind of help you with what you are doing, as you go along the journey. So, this is how I see the role of design shifting from where I was in these 20 years to where I am today and how I'm doing. So there is a pattern, right? It's always about, because it's change, it's transformation. It's like stepping into newer ways of taking design into newer areas. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I think one important takeaway from what you mentioned is at the end of it, we have to live our lives, and there are certain things that we will continue to have. When people say that the way we work has transformed, the way we live, and various aspects of our lives, right? So be it healthcare and then be it our well-being, and all those things have been transformed completely. But I think one important point that you mentioned is while all these things are here to stay, because at the end of it, we are humans and we have to live, but the problems might have changed. The kind of problems that we need to be observant about, and then we as designers need to go after, right? So what are some of the things that you're seeing as in interesting problems that designers can focus on going forward in any of these given areas in general? So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think, people now understand customer centricity, user experiences, at least, for most part, at least, that challenge we have overcome. But I think where I think designers have a long way to put in futures, right? I mean, when I say this, like, when I talk about customer centricity or user experience or even organizational transformation, trying to image, ultimately the objective is to achieve innovation, or profits is the larger goal. But I'm only saying, how can we look at making it purposeful? How can we look at making it people centric? How can we rethink design, even before it starts getting into the deployment process of things, right? We are still in the solution stage. How do we step back? How can we look at design informing the strategy space? How can we look at design at an organizational level, at a societal level? How can we look at design embedding into the process? There's so much that can be done. So I would look at not just having a very narrow vision to it, but just being natural at it, right? I mean, and looking at how we can take design to different other areas, unrelated areas, which is outside of our area of work.
Sure. Yeah. Now that is making me think to tie it back to the fundamentals of it, right? So how are designers being trained, and then education becomes an important area of focus, and then we all know that are we training students in the right way for where the industry is today? And then with this big shift, um, we are now unsure that how do we prepare students for the opportunities that we're going to get in big shift and stuff like that. So any thoughts on how should educational system adapt or align to the big shift kind of thinking?
It's a very relevant question, at least for me, because it's exactly what I've been thinking of quite deeply of late. Because I'm working with the college to put together a curriculum for their students, right? And then I'm just looking at the curriculum now. While we focus on design thinking, the approaches, discovery phase and all development phase and all of that, I think what we are missing is the core why design, right? I mean, and this is where I would like to draw references from um, people who I really admire, like Peter Hans or Don Norman, right? They were natural designers. They didn't take to design because they wanted to innovate or they wanted customer centricity. They took to design because they really had a problem to solve with, and they used design to do that, right? And then they kind of worked on along those lines. So I think while education systems and all of that must focus on tools, methods, processes, and all of that, I think we should also take a step back to kind of um, get people to understand design as a philosophy, as a way of life, as as a must-have. They should feel design before even getting into the processes. Because right now, our focus is straight on how do we achieve it. It's the how, right? It's the technique.
Yeah.
But I'm saying we should actually look back as to why are we looking at design as a tool, and why is it important? I think that is very important for us to kind of understand. And I might sound a bit philosophical here, but it's grounded on logic, right? Because design kind of is a very powerful tool to create change. And I would look at it like armed forces or something like that. I mean, that kind of responsibility that I think designers should actually carry. And so it's very important to understand how to use this tool wisely, and how should we look at different, just not the processes, but to understand the fundamentals and core before we look at implementing, design thinking or approaches in organizations and systems.
Yeah, rightly said. Rightly said. I think that brings me back to, I think you kind of touched upon your involvement in education, and then all those key aspects. I think fundamental aspect to this whole thing, right? So now can our audience get a sneak peek into what you're going to present at the conference? So can you give us a high level overview?
Yeah. So if you look at whatever I've spoken, right, it all ties to people, right? And it all ties to people, purpose, values, and future. Because it's very important for the future to be sustainable, for the future to be, human-centric, people-centric, of course, enabled by technology. I think it's very important for us to get this mix right. And for this to happen, and also to solve complex problems, because these are very, as we step into the kind of unfamiliar futures that we are talking about, and we all know, I think complex problem solving, how do you look at problems, very very important. And in that context, it's very important to get this mix right, purpose, values, how are we creating these intersections, and it has to be very strong. And for that, I think inclusion and diversity is very critical, because if we are able to solve a complex problem, not because we read a problem which is as complex can come from multiple perspectives, can come only from lived experiences, wisdom, collective intelligence, right? So I'm looking at inclusion more from the perspective of collective intelligence rather than the right. Of course, it's the right thing to do. And so to be able to achieve that, is the inclusion that we are talking about today adequate? What are the changes? I'm not generalizing. I'm only looking at it from my experiences of working, or having been part of many organizations for these 20 years. So how do we rethink inclusion in that context? I think that is what I'm going to be touching upon. And how can we kind of use, collective intelligence, understanding of how collective intelligence works, to kind of achieve this inclusion that we are talking about to create this preferred futures.
Great. Now, finally, how do you think UX India, all the activities that we are doing, and then all your interests, as you mentioned, right? So how do they align, and what excites you about UX India as a platform?
Yeah, see, I'm actually very, very excited. I am an introvert, so I just keep to myself and my work. But I think I came across this somewhere. I don't even recall where, and I'm like, this is so cool, and this is what we need, and this is what we need to support. And especially in a place like India, I think it's very important to have these kind of conversations, broaden our thinking about design, because even after all this education and awareness, people still think of design as the design or user interface or whatever, right? So and then we need to, even with a lot of understanding and awareness of design or of what we mean by design, I think it's very important to have collective conversations from people who are practicing design, who are taking design approaches in organizations and public sectors. And I think it's very important for us to come together as a group and share our experiences and collaborate and do our own best in our individual sphere. So I'm really thankful to UX India for having curated this conference, and I'm really happy to help in whatever way I can. Because I think it's very important, and this is something that I'd like to support.
Great. Thanks, Vanitha. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts with our community today. I think all the insights that you shared, I think they'll be super valuable to our community. So we look forward to your talk at UX India 2021. Thanks again.
Thank you, Shama. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you. Lovely chatting with you.